I think we'll begin. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Clara Mallon and I am delighted to chair today's webinar on funding and career progression for the Irish Society for Theatre Research. So the session today is aimed particularly at postgraduate students and early career researchers who are thinking about research funding, postdoctoral applications, and what it actually means to build a research career in practice or in practical terms. So there's already, as I'm sure most of you are aware, a great deal of information and formal guidance online. However, what we wanted today to be about alternatively is the less visible side of the process, the things that people often learn through experience or unsuccessful applications and informal conversations. So what I'd like us to talk broadly about today is progression. So not just how to secure funding, but how researchers begin to build sustainable careers, identities, and opportunities. So it's not how to do an application workshop. It's more intended to feel like an honest conversation on navigating funding applications, developing research projects, and managing things like rejection, revision, and sustaining an identity within theatre research and performance studies. So another thing I think it's important to note before we begin is the fact that the landscape is obviously changing. Research Ireland we're very coy about the changes afoot, but there are certainly big changes ahead with their postdoctoral funding landscape. So it's important to bear that in mind throughout our discussion today. I think most of what we discuss will still be broadly relevant. We're very fortunate to have three brilliant speakers joining us today, each bringing very different experiences to the table. So I'm going to begin now by introducing each panelist, and then we will move to a more conversational discussion. So our first panelist is Dr Ciara McAllister, who is currently a Research Ireland postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Galway. And Ciara's research explores intersections of gender, class, and ethno-nationalism in 20th century Irish literature and theatre. Ciara completed her PhD at Queen's University Belfast in 2023, where her doctoral work examined representations of the working class during the Troubles. Her work has received a number of prestigious awards, including the Margaret Cuthbert Fraser Research Prize and the American Conference of Irish Studies Postgraduate Prize. Alongside Ciara's academic work, she has also worked within the arts sector through Future Screens Northern Ireland, which focuses on skills and employability, and she currently serves as the prize officer with ISTR, so welcome Ciara. We're also joined today by Marine Berthiot, who is currently an MSCA postdoctoral fellow at the University of Galway. So Maureen completed her PhD at the University of Edinburgh, focusing on Aotearoa New Zealand literature, and her current research examines Magdalen cultural production and restorative justice through a transnational and multilingual lens. Her forthcoming monograph, Women Writing Girlhood, Trauma in Aotearoa, New Zealand, will be published with Bloomsbury Publishing, and she is also developing public-facing research initiatives, including seminar series and an upcoming podcast. So welcome, Maureen. And finally, we are delighted to welcome Dr Ciara L. Murphy, who is a lecturer in drama at TU Dublin. Ciara's work focuses on modern and contemporary Irish performance practice, arts policy, and socially engaged performance. Her monograph, Performing Social Change on the Island of Ireland from Republic to Pandemic, was published with Routledge in 2023, and she is currently the Vice President of ISTR and lead researcher on the National Safe to Create project, which seeks to improve working conditions across Ireland's artistic and creative sectors. So welcome, Ciara. So I suppose to kickstart this conversation, I think maybe a good place to begin would be career journeys and entering really funding landscapes more generally. So, a question that I would like to put to our speakers today is could you each briefly talk us through your journey from postgraduate research to your current role and when funding or research opportunities first started to shape your career path? Now, maybe we'll start with the order in which I introduced our speakers. So, if Ciara McAllister, if you'd like to answer first.
Yeah, no problem. I think I feel like I'm still at a very, very early stage of my research career and moving from kind of PhD to the postdoc. And it's a funny thing because in my head it's been about 6 months since I submitted my PhD. And actually, yeah, it was 2023, so nearly 3 years ago now. And I kind of felt this quite acutely. I was looking at research funding recently, and to be considered for it, you had to have it was early career, and you had to have had done your Viva or submitted maybe within the last 3 years, and this was the last year I could apply for it. And I guess the reason that I have that weird, feeling very immediately out of it while I'm not actually immediately out of it is because how it all timed for me. I submitted in October 2023. I vived in December, but then I didn't graduate until June that year. And so there is sometimes that gap between, you have to have for some funding applications, you have to have submitted and corrected. For some of them, you have to have graduated. And I found myself, I guess, in this period of in between this for a long time. And then even, I graduated in the June, I applied for IRC that year. And then, there's a 1 year turnaround before you actually start the postdoc project from when you've applied for it as well. And so you always have to be thinking a year ahead of yourself and be planning and preparing a year ahead of yourself. And so I think the biggest shock to my system came whenever I submitted my PhD and felt like the work had all been done. And then there was very much a what now, for me to have come out of the PhD and gone straight into postdoc work, I would have had to have applied for a postdoc, applied for funding a year before. So I guess that's something to be aware of if you are still doing your PhD, to kind of buffer. I know whenever I started my PhD, everybody said to me, save, make sure you're saving for whenever you complete. And that was kind of the most difficult thing for me too, was, trying to do funding applications, trying to write postdoc applications and trying to work and trying to, feed yourself and pay your bills and keep a foot in the academic world as well. So anyway, so I did my IRC application, thankfully was successful with it. So started the following year then, which was September just past. Um, so we're May now, so I'm coming towards the end of my got a 1 year postdoc from IRC, which was to complete the monograph. So I'm back in the headspace of okay, what next? And even whenever I started this postdoc, knowing that everything is a year in advance, as soon as I got in, I was like, okay, what am I going to do next year? And so that constantly kind of comes up as well. And I guess without trying to be negative, I'm really lucky and I'm really, really grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And, to get an IRC Research Ireland postdoc in the first place is, it feels like an incredible privilege, but, there is so much kind of, yeah, unspoken work and labor that goes on behind the scenes and kind of longer journeys, I think, sometimes than it appears too. So I guess that's important for me to say from the outset.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone talks about those liminal spaces enough in between. Like, I know that some people are encouraged now, I think it's crazy to start your postdoc application before you finished your PhD, and some people, fair play to them, are able to manage that. But I remember coming to the end of my PhD, I was like, I need tunnel focus. Do you know what I mean? I can't have an application for another project alongside. So,
And I also, sorry, just to say that I wouldn't have had the clarity. I don't think if I hadn't had a little bit of a break after I had submitted, but also the whole thing being done. I mean, anyone who is near completion or has completed their PhD knows that those last kind of 6 months to a year is whenever your PhD takes shape. It's when it becomes something very, very different to the idea you had when you set out. And I think that, allowing yourself the time, allowing yourself to finish one thing first before you move on to something else, like, it's part of the process and you should be allowed to enjoy and celebrate finishing one process before kind of, yeah, flying into another and being bogged down by the
Yeah,
work of that.
yeah, but it's that neoliberal thing of, you know what I mean? You should be always ahead, you should be always aiming for more and better. You should have the next thing lined up, when you finish well before you finish the first thing. Well, thanks so much for that, Ciara. Maureen, we might move on to you if you want to talk us through a bit about your journey to date.
So I guess that I agree with Kira on the fact that it's complicated at the end of the PhD to know what's going to be the next step. So in my case, I applied to three different funding bodies: IRC, MSCA, and another one in Flanders. And my project was the same, but it got rejected from Research Ireland and from Flanders, but not from Marie Curie. And Marie Curie, I had to apply twice. At the first time, I received the seal of excellence, and the second time I got it. And so obviously in the meanwhile, I needed to feed my child. So I worked as a teaching fellow in environmental humanities, and those were two very, yeah, I learned a lot while I was teaching there. And so, yeah, I guess that, um, and a postdoc is not the only option.
And I'd just like to ask, how did you manage three postdoc applications? Because I know that from the little bit that I know about MSCA, the application's huge, and Research Ireland, the application's huge. How did you do three?
Well, so while I was still in my PhD, at the very end of it, I tried IRC and the one in Flanders. And then the second year, I tried IRC again because I had been advised to reapply. Um, so the first time I had missed it by 1 point, but then the second time I didn't hear from them at all. And so the second time I applied for MSCA and IRC, and then the third year for MSCA only, and I did not believe in it at all. I was like, okay, I'm doing this, but there's no chance I'm going to have funding. And in the end, it worked.
And MSCA is highly prestigious funding as well, It's European golden standard. So we might move on to Ciara L. Murphy now. Ciara, if you'd like to talk a bit about your journey.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's interesting sitting here trying to reflect on it. I'm a little bit further on in the process. I graduated from my PhD in 2020, but I actually submitted it in the autumn of 2019. So I have a sort of a different journey. I always found getting funding difficult. I did get my PhD funded, but kind of like at the last minute, from the internal Galway scholarship. So I finished my PhD while knowing that I had a job to go to. So I got a teaching fellowship, in Limerick, and it was by basically covering someone else's sabbatical. So I had interviewed for that before I'd submitted my PhD. So I kind of knew I didn't have that like immediate liminal space. I kind of knew in the August that I was going somewhere. I did learn a lot from that process. And then COVID happened right then. So I think I had one of the last in-person vivas in the University of Galway before everything shut down. But it was sort of strange, kind of going back to what Ciara McAllister said, kind of like finishing the PhD, and then my Viva wasn't until January, so it was quite a stretch. Um, but in a way that was helpful because it gave me a lot of clarity too in terms of like approaching the Viva, and I was also putting in my book proposal and the Viva, and like that kind of really helped me navigate that because I was able to come back to the PhD project with a fresher eyes because the first job that you go into post PhD, first full-time job is incredibly intense and you sort of don't have time to kind of like look in the rear view mirror. Certainly that was my experience. So I then got another job. It was a 1 year or was a 9 month, I think, lectureship in the University of Galway midway through COVID, and I was delighted. So that saved me from having to apply to the IRC postdoc for another year. But with these short-term contracts, anyone that knows that will know, you are just sort of delaying an inevitable process. So while I was in that job, I was also writing my book and I was trying to put together this postdoc project, which I'll be honest in saying I didn't really believe in. And I couldn't do the monograph conversion because I was already under contract and it was already nearly done. So I was putting in something and hoping for the best, and I didn't get it, and that wasn't surprising to me. Um, so I started to look around for other opportunities, and I was sort of, teaching kind of like ad hoc in places. And I was really lucky to start looking around for other postdoctoral opportunities. Someone advised me, and it's good advice that rather than trying to seek out and apply for your own funding, try and find a postdoctoral position attached to another project. So I ended up getting a position as a postdoc on a 4-year Horizons 2020 Digital Humanities project out of the English department in NUI Galway. And my role was mainly focused on communications. So the expertise of the project wasn't necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I had kind of skills from other kind of parts of my like professional service that really worked. So I felt like I'd won the lottery of 4 years to kind of sit and think and not have to worry about it. And it was an amazing experience, and kind of luxurious in a sense to be able to have a postdoc while you're writing your book, in a place that you'd already worked and kind of done your PhD, so you knew the systems. I suppose what was interesting about that was I ended up getting a permanent job, about 14 months into that project, in Dundalk. And 9 months after that, I got another permanent job where I am now. And the person who replaced me on my postdoctoral project has since also got a permanent job. So I don't know if it was just that postdoctoral position that had some sort of like magic touch to it, or what I actually think it was the longevity of the project. So the fact that I had 4 years in a project, that I knew that my salary was secure, that postdocs, even when you're on someone else's project, and I had an amazing kind of like principal investigator on that project, they want you to succeed as well. So you have time to kind of like bed in and do your own work. And that gave me the luxury to be able to kind of like really look around and be quite strategic about applying for jobs. It sounds like I just had this amazing, blessed journey, and I'm not denying that I've been incredibly lucky, but I'd say I probably have 35 rejected job applications in all that time as well. So I've been lucky, but rejection after rejection was kind of building up on me at that point. So the postdoc allowed me time to pause and only apply for jobs that I really felt like I could compete for, rather than throwing them out kind of like anywhere and hoping something would tangentially stick. Um, it's interesting to be on the other side of things now because kind of like Ciara, I feel like I finished my PhD 5 minutes ago, but actually I'm in the position now where I'm trying to help people apply for PhD funding, like to bring on like as I'm their supervisor, which is a whole other level of imposter syndrome. Um, it seems a lot more difficult now though, because I do think that the job market has contracted to a certain degree, whereby the kind of usual fail safes of like Britain and the United States are not the way they were when I started my PhD in 2015. And that has been quite turbulent. So um yeah, I've never managed to get the Research Ireland, or the IRC as the artist formerly known as, to fund me for anything. But at the same time, as Marine said, there are other opportunities to get there. But it's the moment where you find a chance to stand still for long enough that you can actually like really put the time in to do all of the building up that you need to kind of get yourself into that like employable position.
And Ciara, just to go back to what you said, because I think that for most of us, well, in the case of me anyway, what a lot of universities push is Research Ireland or MSCA. What is kind of an alternative avenue that I suppose, where do we look for these positions where it's someone else's project that's funded and you come on board as a postdoctoral research? Like, where do we find that information? Where do we go looking for those positions? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, so jobs are often advertised internally first before they go on to like the kind of public jobs or the university jobs network. I had actually seen the job that I ended up getting come through the mailing list, but as soon as I saw digital humanities and computational literary studies, I was just like, no. But actually then another lecturer in the department actually sent this to me and was like, I think you would actually really fit this portion of the project. I think you should apply. And I was like, well, do you know what? I will, because why not? I know the cast of characters involved. And actually, like, I was really well suited to it. So sometimes other people can kind of see things that are for you a little bit better. But the kind of the mailing lists, so the ISTR mailing list is pretty good for putting out opportunities. But the internal stuff, like every institution has that like Friday afternoon email where they tell you all of the like job opportunities that are coming. Be nosy and have a look. And like if you see anything that you feel could tangentially link to you, look a little bit deeper because I never would have bet on myself to get that position. I thought it was a total long shot.
Okay, great. And Ciara, I'm really glad you brought up failure and this idea of, rejected. Maureen, you mentioned it as well. But I suppose what I'd like to talk a bit about before we get to failures and rejections and resilience and all of that would be unspoken advice. Okay. So, what are some of the advice that is not in major guidelines or published online? Things people only really learn through experience and conversations. So what's something all of you have learned about funding and or job applications that nobody tells you explicitly, I suppose is my next question. So whoever'd like to take that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I don't think I have too much to say. But I guess ask for help. Um, Nobody does it on their own. And I think the idea that people get these jobs, get these roles because they are better than you or they, are exceptionally talented or they worked harder than you did is sometimes just, masking the fact that people have someone who's read their application for them or, people have found out secret tips that you didn't know or known what way to steer things. There's so much grit and determination that goes in for everyone. Every single person who works in academia, who wants to make it in academia, comes into it knowing that they have to work really, really hard. So, that's kind of the base level. It's not that, yeah, I don't know, that's my kind of opinion is that I don't think that anybody gets something because they work harder, because I think everyone is absolutely busted and defeated at how hard that they're working. So don't kind of put it back onto yourself. And don't kick yourself for it if you've done the best that you can. Um, it's really about asking for help and not being afraid to go, okay, I've written something here. Can someone else read it? I have never met you before, but I'm going to send out an email because I know that you've done this before I have, and I wonder if you could give me some advice on how you got to where you are. Yeah, look for who's done the thing that you want to do. Seek them out and try and work out how they got there, I guess. In terms of my own application as well, do leave yourself enough time to do that, enough time to, to get the feedback and get the advice that you need. So yeah, you need to think further down the line, I guess, too. Um, and be realistic. You can only do so much. Yeah, you can't apply for every that funding opportunity or every job that's going. What Ciara was just saying there, being able to streamline and go, okay, I'm going to put my effort into this and not absolutely everything that's out there. And focusing on one thing at a time too. But I think, I don't know, my advice in general for all of this is you're not the problem. So don't turn it in on yourself, and don't beat yourself up too much about it too. And that, I guess, comes back to the failure, question as well. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough out here. So be kind and ask for help as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ciara. And I do think, sometimes it's just down to luck too. I know people who last minute shoved in an application for Research Ireland or MSCA, and they just got lucky and their project, resonated better with reviewers. So I think by acknowledging that some of it is just luck as well as hard work makes it a bit easier to take it when you're rejected. Ciara and Maureen, do you have any unspoken advice?
Mine would be around timing. I think it kind of goes back to luck. I think you can be lucky or unlucky with your timing. And maybe you're hitting something with your project that is just not the time for it. But maybe next year it will be, or maybe the collaborators that you thought that you wanted to work with are actually maybe there's a better fit elsewhere. And I think having what's undervalued and underrated, and what I was really lucky to have was having a really strong peer network, a group of people who are all going through the same thing, who know what it's like now. Because even I'm giving advice and I don't know what it's like because I haven't been precarious in a few years. So everyone who's like in the trenches together knows what it's like, and everyone else with the best will in the world are probably giving outdated advice. So being able to sense check that with other people, and there are times you're going to be going for the same job. That happened to me, where there'll be groups of us going for jobs, some, and you have that kind of like those strange dynamics, but it was only ever supportive. But just knowing that you're not going mad, by talking to other people who are going through what you're going through, because people who are like further along the line are for like it's changing so much now that like advice is sort of subjective enough, and just to kind of to like listen absolutely to like expertise, but be aware of like that you're the expert of your own experience and your own strategy as well.
Yeah, and I think like, as Ciara McAllister said, be kind to yourself and be kind to your peers because, we're all in this precarious, oftentimes, position together. Maureen, have you any unspoken tips?
Well, I agree with the fact that it takes a long time to produce an application. In the case of Marie Curie, the number of pages is limited, so you have to be very clear about your objectives and where you want to go. I was lucky because I found a mentor who supported me throughout the 3 years of the application. And she believed in the project and she was very supportive all those years, even when I did not believe in the project anymore. And I found a lot of support as well from the research office with Una Duane, who gave a lot of her time on the application and provided a lot of advice. Um, and yeah, there were things as well, technical things that I didn't know how to do, like a Gantt chart. Nobody ever told me how to create that, and it took me ages. So yeah, just give yourself a lot of time to fulfill yeah, everything that they want from you.
Yeah, and I think leaning on mentors is a really important point. Like Ciara, maybe you can speak to this with job applications. Is there a mentor helping you navigate that system as well as postdoc applications?
Yeah, I mean, I have to shout out to Miriam Houghton, who isn't here, I know, but she was my supervisor. She was amazing. And she's continues to be my mentor. You know what I mean? I still sense check things with her, ask her for advice at all stages. Um, I feel like you're either good at job applications or good at funding applications. And I was always terrible at funding applications. I could never sell my project, but I could kind of sell myself a little bit in that way. And so I was able to kind of, even though everyone was telling me to kind of go for like funding applications, Mariam in fairness was like, I think you need to like go for jobs. Like I think that's where you're stronger. So you're able to manage that. I think as well, like if you can't, because not everyone is fortunate enough to have a mentor. I know loads of people who've been in really tricky supervisory relationships, and that is really difficult. And I would say to try and find a mentor, even if it's on your level, or like Ciara McAllister said, to reach out to someone who has the thing you want or is where you are, and then maybe is on a similar journey. Because I do feel there needs something to said about kind of privilege and all of this as well. So I had no caring responsibilities. I had a supportive partner because I had gone straight into jobs. I was relatively financially stable, like, barely making it through, but not like in danger. And that is a different mentality to be approaching all of this as well. So if you can find someone who can understand the difficulties that you might have, if you've got caring responsibilities, if you don't have a financial buffer or support, someone who either has the same journey as you has had and knows how to navigate that, or can at least understand and appreciate you as a person. Because I think it can be a bit dehumanizing sometimes to kind of go through all of these. And when you get a job rejection, they just are like, sorry to inform you, if you get anything at all, actually. So someone to sort of see the human in you, I think, is really important. And that might be your supervisor if you're lucky, but if not, there are often other great people out there who can be that for you. And I think that's really important, to still feel like a human being at the end of it.
And just to bring it back to Maureen, we have a question in the group chat for you, but it links in with what Ciara's saying about this idea of, you said you got a teaching fellowship so you could feed your child. Someone has written a question in the group saying, do you think that the side role helps in the application being successful? I have heard quite a few people saying that they moved between fixed term roles until they landed their permanent role. Maybe that's directed at you as well, Ciara.
I don't know. That is a very good question. That's the hope. That I don't know if there's any rule on this. I am French. In France, some people move from their PhD position to a tenure position, and just like this. Um, so it really depends. So I cannot say.
I could probably speak to that because it's been my experience. I would say yes, and that's unfair. I've always had kind of side things going on. I've always been sort of like active in kind of policy and research outside of like what I was doing academically. I always had another like thing on the go. But again, that speaks to the fact that I had the freedom and flexibility to do that. But for landing my 4-year postdoc, say, it was the communication skills that I had from other projects, not necessarily like my PhD, that like was able to kind of get me that. I find that for getting the job, people want to know that they can work with you for 40 hours a week, that you're not paying. But also that you can actually do the rest of the stuff. Because like the teaching and the research, we probably all know more or less how to do that. We all know how to stand in front of a class. We obviously know how to like research really well. But can you run an exam board? Can you deal with the external examiners? All of the admin that comes with that. Can you set up your virtual learning environments? Like, even if you can get a 6-month full-time job at like teaching fellow or lecturer level where you're expected to like do that entire job for a period of time, that just sends a signal to everybody else. This person knows what it is to do this job, not only like functionally, but like administratively for the rest of the time. Because it is different coming from like hourly paid kind of teaching where other people are kind of doing all that stuff for you, into like the actual job itself is far more administratively heavy than you would expect. So I think the side roles helped me get the postdoc, which gave me the time to like really pursue that. But if you could even get anything that sounds like it's you for a couple of months, it seems like you're just like delaying the inevitable, but actually having that full-time lecturing experience that's what they're looking for on job applications. And I know that from the other side now as well. I can confirm.
Yeah, and I think I know for Research Ireland anyway, and Ciara McAllister, maybe you can speak to this, that they want to see everything. They also want you to see to have a side hustle that's like non-academic related. So like Ciara, obviously your future screens work and stuff like that. Like apparently you get scored very highly if you can prove that not only have you kept a foot in academia, but also that you're working in the arts or something vaguely relevant, but not necessarily wholly academic.
Yeah, I feel like since I started my PhD, I've been trying to hedge my bets in every possible way. And say yes to anything that sounds like it would look good on my CV. And I mean, that's good in some ways, and it's absolutely terrible in other ways. Sometimes I feel like, jack of all trades, master of none. I feel like I've kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything. Um, and I also had a similar thing that Ciara's talking about, I guess, where that kind of divide between, teaching roles and research roles when I came out of my PhD and I was applying for teaching fellowships as well. And I was asking people for advice, early career researchers or more established researchers who had taken the path, and I was asking them for advice. And I had one person who has done really, really well in research say to me, "Oh, I can't help you with that. I do terrible at teaching applications, but I'll pass you to somebody else who I know is good at teaching applications." And it's that kind of, I think, yeah, do you put all your time into getting teaching experience and, carving out the public work and, working in different skill sets? Or do you dedicate your time more to sitting in and doing the research and writing? And that's something that I think that I've really struggled with, of how to kind of get that balance between, yeah, being seen to do everything and getting involved and learning all the new things and, upskilling and going to training sessions and doing all of that, and also finding the time to sit down and write the thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really difficult balance, and I actually don't think there's a right or wrong way to go about it. But in the interest of time, I'd like to talk now a bit about rejection, which some of you have mentioned, revision, and Maureen has obviously mentioned this idea of revising topics, and also resilience, which comes alongside, this landscape where, as someone who has a PhD, unfortunately, what's part and parcel of our life is rejections. So my next question is, could any of you talk about experiences of rejections or unsuccessful applications and what you learned from them?
I might jump in there because I'd say I have more than everybody else in the reject pile. I was just looking before we came on here. I have like a very sad Google Drive folder called rejections. And for like academic jobs, non-academic jobs, there's two types of rejection. The long shot rejection, where you kind of were hedging your bets and you didn't think it was for you at that current time. And then the rejection where you're like, this could actually, like, it's actually feasible and actually likely that you could get the job. That's where the real hurt is. At the start, I was just like firing out things left and right, but even the long shot rejections really wear on a person's soul, I find. I have been mainly unsuccessful in everything that I've applied to, essentially. Especially funding, I found funding really difficult. Even now, my professional career, when I'm applying for bits and pieces of funding, I find that a real struggle. And I think it's because I never was successful as a PhD. I got my PhD scholarship, but since then, I've never managed to kind of like crest that wave. Um, there's two like within the kind of like probable rejection or probable like I might get this job rejection. There's also the idea of being both the internal and the external candidate. It's incredibly painful to apply for a job internally and not get it. Because you feel like it's a rejection of the place, especially as a PhD student, you feel like it's a rejection of the place where you worked, of everyone around you that knows, and being pipped to the post by someone from the outside that's a little bit maybe more mysterious and has, something that's not familiar. And that's a real thing, actually, the idea that you kind of have to go away and come back again. People say both things. People say, oh, this place loves hiring internally. This place will never hire you if you've like done your PhD there. And I don't know how true or not true that is, but I do think that there is something about being the mysterious candidate. So I would say that when I started to cast my net a little bit further afield, I had a little bit more success there in that regard. What did I learn from it? I learned that you can reuse quite a lot of material from even unsuccessful applications. And that actually what you need to do, especially if you end up like in like a longer process, like a couple of years of a postdoc, is you need a document where every time you do something interesting or cool, then you need to put it in there so that when it comes time for you to redo your CV, you're not working off something that's kind of like older. Um, But I think your network is really important there, and that kind of mentorship thing to kind of keep you human. I would say always ask for feedback. If you get to the shortlisting stage, like if you actually get into the interview, then that means they felt that you were like qualified, you could be doing the job. It's just down to what happens on the day. And I will also say that I do think that the interview process for academic work can be it's quite the gauntlet. They're like for my permanent jobs, you have to do like teaching demonstrations. You've got to like sh do presentations. You know, if you're going to the States, for example, like you'll ha end up having to like fly there and do like campus visits and all of those sort of things. It can be really involved. So you kind of need something to kind of ground you in that time. But kind of like what Ciara said, you have to try not to take it personally. But I just want to flag for people coming down the line that you do take it personally in some instances where you feel like, oh, that should have actually been my job though. And I think everyone has that moment. But that can also bring quite a lot of clarity actually in terms of what you're approaching. And it mightn't actually be anything personal against you at all. In fact, it's just the way it is now. People are coming in and they are like, you know, like they've got 5 years on you maybe, but they're happy to take a more entry level job here because of the security. So there's that battle. But I would just say if you can be strategic, if you have the luxury of that to kind of apply for things that you think might actually be the this is me camp, and to just keep like revisiting your materials, to not put in the same application for everything, to at least tailor it to the cover letter. I think a cover letter is the thing. I think that's where people do not read your CV. They glance at it to make sure all of the like necessary component parts are there. But in your cover letter, for postdoc jobs as well, this is the same. You need to have a section for every bullet point on that essential and desirables, and to know that they are often fictional categories. In the job that I currently have, it was like said as one thing, but there's often strategies there. So I just kind of chanced it. And in the interview, it turned out that what they were looking for was different than on the cover letter. So I would say that if you kind of feel there's a moment like that, just put your best foot forward, and to just be really strategic about it if you can. You do learn from the rejections, but some of them are more painful than others.
And Ciara, do you have any advice for how you keep going after rejections? Because I know that it's just part and parcel of the landscape, but I think specifically today when success is pushed so much on us, that it's just so hard for it not to feel really personal, you know?
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that because I feel like I got my success quicker than other people have done. And I know people who took them 10 years to get their permanent job. So I feel like I hadn't burned out on that yet. So I was still able to keep going. But I know people who have, and it's incredibly difficult. But I feel because I was really lucky that it happened for me slightly earlier than maybe I was expecting, I didn't reach that yet. Um, but yeah, so I don't know if other people would have a different perspective on that, but I don't feel like I had a chance to hit that wall.
Okay, Maureen, maybe you could speak a bit to that. How did you deal with the rejections and pick yourself back up and decide to keep going?
Um, well, the question is interesting. I guess that what helps is to apply to other jobs at the same time. Like, I mean, when I applied for funding, I also applied for teaching positions. And when I say teaching positions, it's not two or five, it's 10, 15 every time. In France, it's different because we do have campaigns. So we have October, we have March, and we have April. So that's when the positions are available and they come perhaps 50 at a time. So that's when we have to apply for them and then hope to have job interviews. And then when job interviews happen in just like the space of a week, and you have five or six at the same time, and you can feel that it's not going anywhere, that you're going second, that you are not being accepted here, there, and then you have a job. It's like, yay, in the end, it works. So just keep going.
Okay, thanks so much, Maureen.
Clara, can
Ciara.
I just advocate for a healthy mix of cynicism and delusion? I feel like I've mastered the combination of, it must be a fix and there's something better out there for me, to get me through every rejection, trying everything I possibly can to make it not personal to me. And this I'm talking about whenever they won't give you any feedback, because that's the worst. I recently did an application that I spent ages on and just got a, blanket rejection, won't give it any feedback, no feedback's being offered at this time. And that was for a postdoc position that, yeah, I'd spent months working on. Um, and yeah, you have to just go, okay, well, they had something against me. Or, something, whatever it is, whatever the little thing that you can hold on to that makes you not want to go and lock yourself in a cupboard for 2 weeks and cry. And if it is, just pure delusion, if it works for you, then it works for you. Keep going.
Yeah, and it's like rejection is just so much part of the landscape. Not just, I know we've been talking about postdoc positions and we've been talking about applications for jobs and postdocs, but actually publication as well. Journal articles, there's rejections that come in so many different forms. And I do think this idea of building up a resilience and, as Ciara said, having a healthy balance in how you view the rejections is really important. So I suppose I would like to move on to a final question, which we just about have time for before we give questions out to the audience, and that is life after winning funding or winning a permanent position, Ciara, in Ciara L. Murphy. So my next question is, what changes once you secure funding or you move into a funded research role or a permanent position? What aspects of academic life remain challenging, I suppose, is my next question.
Can I start? Not teaching. That was so odd. Yes, I was used to teaching a lot of hours and suddenly nothing. So that was the biggest change for me. And I miss teaching. So I guess I'm for the next position I try to have a balance between teaching and research.
It's a hard balance to strike, though, because prep for teaching takes so long. I don't know how academics do it when they're balancing huge hours and enormous amounts of time teaching and then doing their research along the side. Maybe Ciara, you could speak to that because I think it's just a really difficult balance.
Yeah, so I had the obviously incredibly fortunate but quite strange experience of getting a permanent job and then 9 months later moving to a different permanent job. So when I moved from my postdoc into the job I got, it was the reason that I left was just a one that fit me better, that was like a slightly like more senior position came up and I was really lucky. But I had to live the first year of the permanent job twice in succession, and it is really hard because you want to prove that you deserve it because you definitely don't feel like you do because the imposter syndrome never really goes away. But also you are moving to a new institution. In my case, I hadn't worked in these institutions before. So you are in a completely different system, and I moved from the traditional university system to the technological university system, which is a little bit different. Um, Totally new modules, twice in a row, which didn't actually really relate to each other at all. Now I'd had a bank of previous experience I was able to draw on. Your teaching, I didn't research at all, basically, until like the second year of my current job. I'm in year three now, because you don't have any time to kind of relive that. And your administrative burden like really like accentuates because you're usually going to be put in charge of like a cohort of students and things like that. Those are the things that were really challenging, and doing that twice in a row was tricky in that regard. But what is amazing is the freedom to make plans and to say, I actually am eyeing up this funding in a couple of years. I'm going to start building towards that. I know I'm going to, if I want, I'm going to be in the same place as I am now. That you can actually see progression, that you can put plans in place, that you can implement, like I did a teaching, I like my lecturing position that I had in Galway, like the one after when I was in Limerick, was based on like a project where we did all this like amazing curriculum based like innovation, and then I left and I never got to see how any of it played out or have any impact on it whatsoever. And you can kind of feel like that when you're moving from pillar to post, that you're investing so much in doing it, and then you never actually get to see it come to fruition. So I'm about to see my first full cohort graduate that I've actually had for their entire time. And that feels great because I'm like, oh, I'm here. And you're looking at the other cohorts and you see that they're there as well. So there's a challenge to it initially, but once you bed in and actually you can like the continuity of it is incredibly you can really be quite like innovative and excited with it while not having to do the same amount because you're usually teaching similar modules in similar years, doesn't move around as much. So initially quite daunting, but the long-term benefits are immense.
Ciara, have you anything to add?
I guess just time. I think that that luxury of being able to kind of sit and concentrate on one thing and just have one thing to work on in a day is kind of the big feeling that I have, the big adjustment I think that I can feel of not going, okay, I can set aside 2 hours for this because I have to do A, B, C, and D as well. And actually having, yeah, full time dedicated to the research that you've been trying to finish. That's been the biggest shift, I think, for me.
Sure, it's been difficult navigating a new university. Like no one talks about that, and so much of the funding, there's a mobility rule. Ciara Murphy just mentioned how moving from one university to the next was quite daunting. You're learning where's little things like where's the library, Like I'm sure moving from one university system to another was challenging in itself.
Yeah, and I think the short termness of it too, of knowing that the contract is for a year means that you don't adjust or you don't have the time. You have to learn things quickly. You need to get things off the ground. But again, I think it's about having a good mentor, having good people around you, asking for help from the people who are there. And I mean, I'm a sucker for a mailing list and I'm a sucker for, every training opportunity going and making sure that I know everything that's going on. And that helps too, to kind of just know who the people are that you can speak to and that you can ask questions to.
Yeah, and Maureen, I'm sure it was difficult for you as well because you've done so much research in so many different countries at this point. We're talking about moving from one university in the same country and feeling
Yeah.
that's daunting.
Yeah. I guess that the toughest aspect was to find accommodation. I think that's the problem in Ireland. That's not something that I encountered elsewhere. And also to adapt to my daughter's schedule because she is at school and school here finishes quite early compared to other countries. So yeah, that was tricky at the start, but I've managed to be extremely flexible in the way I work. And I work in the corridors, I work everywhere, in the bus. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think flexibility is very important, but I'm just seeing now that we're 5 minutes before the end, so I am going to ask the audience if they have any questions, if they would like to either raise their hand or pop a question in the chat box. I'll give people a few moments to have a think about any questions. I suppose I do have actually more questions. I suppose this is more to Maureen and Ciara McAllister, but what, in both of your view, does a finished or ready application look like in terms of postdoc? And I suppose, Ciara, I'd ask you the same about job applications, but maybe if Ciara McAllister and Maureen could tell us what a complete application. I know it's never finished, the thing is never done, but in your view, what is the point where you get to where you say, okay, this is ready to submit?
The deadline. You have no more choice. You cannot invent a new version. Yeah. I think there will be a question as well from Dominica
Yes,
in the audience. Yeah.
yeah, thanks, Barry. You just put that in the chat as well. Yeah, fire ahead. Dominica, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I thought you were in a. Sorry, yeah. My question is sort of, do you think that having a lot of applications, a lot of conference presentations, is helpful in applications both for teaching positions and for postdocs?
So sorry, you cut off there. Could you repeat it? Do you think having lots of conference presentations?
Yes, and publications,
Yeah.
um, is like practically helpful, or is it just sort of, well, obviously it's nice for your research, but is it also, um, yeah, I think my question is about like the practicality of it.
Can I take that one just to start? I would
Yep.
say yes, as much as you can, and that's helpful to you. So like if it's a conference that you know will actually benefit you 100%, I would say be strategic about the publications. The reason I say yes to the conference is yes, it's incredibly enriching for your research, but I have met some of my best collaborators at conferences, people who I work with again and again. Also, people who are like keeping their eye out on job markets in different places or might think of you for something, give you a heads up if someone's going on maternity leave or a sabbatical and say, hey, this is coming down the line. So I think there's no negative really if you can make it work for like the conferences that you want to go to. In terms of publications with the new rules, I think you have to kind of be strategic. So I think they value higher quality peer reviewed kind of like things rather than say like edited chapters and edited collections. But I always found that having chapters and edited collections was really helpful for me to kind of like get the experience to start kind of publishing work. But also I find them really helpful as a researcher. My students find them incredibly helpful as well. But I do think that if you have a finite amount of time, they're looking for high impact peer review stuff. And I want to just give a shout out to the monograph because everyone told me when I was coming through my PhD that the monograph was dead and it didn't matter anymore. But everyone that I know that's gotten a permanent job in this field has had a monograph just come out. So I do think it's still really important to whoever is on the assessing committees. So I would say quality over quantity is important, and but that's and conference papers become publications, so it's kind of in the same train. So if you can kind of be like efficient with it, then I would say yes. I think that really helped me in applications for my jobs. Obviously I never really got funded after my PhD, so not sure how helpful it is for that, but I would imagine similarly so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Maureen and Ciara McAllister, I know with Research Ireland that the publications are really important for that application. Ciara, do you want to speak a bit about that?
That was something that I was really anxious about whenever I was doing it, when I was doing my IRC application. Because I didn't have, as Ciara said, a high impact peer reviewed article. And I was a bit like, oh, can I even do this? And they had changed the regulation so that you didn't have to have it and you could submit, a chapter of your PhD or something instead. I had a chapter in an edited collection. And I included so there was a section in the application for peer reviewed publications and for other publications. And I included my conference papers and blog posts and things like that. I just kind of put them all in anyway. I agree with Ciara about going to conferences for the people that you meet and for that connection and to be able to kind of promote your work and promote your research too. And yeah, I think that that's really valuable. I think that high impact peer reviewed journals are the gold star and they're kind of what is always going to be, they're always going to be important. But I'm not sure if like depending on what stage of your career you're in, if it's just to get a postdoc where and during that postdoc you are going to write a monograph or you're going to, produce 3 articles. I'm not sure if it's the number one criteria. I definitely don't feel like it was for my application anyway.
Maureen, what about MSCA?
I guess that yes, articles, publications in general, conferences are important. Yes, go for it.
Okay, and I just see we have yeah, a question in the chat. Is it a finished monograph? I think, Ciara, you've already answered that, or a book contract. Well, but I maybe in the applications, I think a book contract for Research Ireland and MSCA it would be, enough, I would imagine. So I am seeing that we are just 1 minute over time. So I am just going to offer some closing remarks. So thank you so much to our brilliant panelists for such an honest and generous discussion today. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us. I certainly learned a lot. I want to extend a special thanks to Finian O'Gorman, who did all of the work organising behind the scenes, and a special thanks to Barry Houlihan for setting up the Zoom and managing the technical side today. I think the most valuable part of these conversations is that they make visible the realities behind things like academic CVs and funding announcements, and I think it's really important to make that hidden aspect seen. So, on behalf of the Irish Society for Theatre Research, I would like to thank everyone again, and I hope today's discussion has demystified a few aspects for everyone. So, thank you and have a lovely evening.